Hey Doodles, Virtual Mrs. Hagen here, and in this video I'm going to teach you a little bit about drawing techniques. So if you're following along and practicing these techniques with me, you're going to need some crayons and perhaps a marker. So the very first crayon technique that I'm going to show you guys is one that you use for absolutely every crayon drawing that you make. And it's actually making the shapes that you want to color or drawing with the crayon. So just taking your crayon and making the picture of whatever it is you want to color in is really the first step and the first technique that we always learn, at least in art class, with our crayons. The second technique is filling in shapes, which is the second thing that you usually learn in art class. And a lot of times it's the first thing you learn with crayons, and that's just taking whatever color you want your picture to be and nicely filling in the area. And I tell my students that when I do this, my hand, it moves very, very fast, but my arm goes very, very slow. And what that does is it fills in the whole area nicely and neatly, and we don't have a lot of big scribbles in between. The next technique is blending, and that is when you have two colors that you mix together on the page in the same spot. And so for this one, I'm just going to make a circle, and then you fill it in with your first color, or fill most of it in. Sometimes you don't fill in the whole thing. And then you take your second color and you mix them together. Sometimes you can mix more than one color in. So maybe I can use my blending to add a little bit of a shadow, or even a highlight in my sunshine over there. Okay, so the next two techniques are very similar, and you'll notice that I've already made two circles for this. Most of these techniques, friends, I am just going to use circles to show you what they are. And in this case, these two techniques, like I said, are incredibly similar. They are called repetitive mark making and overdrawing. And like blending, where it sounds like you're blending two colors together, overdrawing and repetitive mark making sound like what they are. Repetitive mark making means you're going to take your crayon, and on top of what you colored in, you are going to repeat making the same marks over and over again. You need to add something to your design. And overdrawing means that you're going to take your crayon, and it could be the same crayon or a different color for both of these, and you will just draw something on top of a space that you've filled in. So overdrawing, you are drawing over top. Repetitive mark making, you are repeating a mark over and over again. Another technique is called controlled scribbling. And again, that's exactly what it sounds like. It is when you are scribbling, but you are controlling the space that it is staying inside. And so if I'm making a circle here, it doesn't mean I'm going to scribble all over the page. It means that I'm going to keep my scribbles inside that one specific space. Another technique is using the pressure of the crayon, and usually this is used to show highlighting and shadows. You remember, highlight is where the light hits the object and bounces off and makes a light spot, and a shadow is where the light can't get to, so it's like the shadow that you cast on the ground. And in fact, we'll give a big shadow on the ground for this one. And to use pressure, all I do is where I want something to be darker, I press harder. And where I want it to be lighter, I press softer. And that creates a difference in the color tone of your crayon, darker and lighter of the same tone. And these next three techniques I'm going to show you are kind of more for fun, but can be used depending on what project you are working on. The first one is called crayon rubbing, and that's when you have an object. I'm just going to use a regular old rectangle piece of paper for this, and you put it under the paper, and you take your crayon and color on top. And what that does is it shows you the object or the texture of the object that you had underneath it. A lot of friends in kindergarten do this with leaves when they're studying fall. But you can do it with other things as well. The next one is called a crayon resist, which is when you draw something with crayon. I'm going to show you guys a few colors here. That's some white just because it's dramatic and fun. And then you take something that is water-based. In this case, I'm just going to use a washable crayon. You could use watercolor paint as well. And you just go right on top. And the crayon resists the water-based thing from sticking to the paper, and it still shows through what you created. And the very last technique that I'm going to show you guys is called incising or engraving. Depends on who you are and what your curriculum's vocabulary is, but in this case all it means is we're actually going to scrape through crayon to reveal crayon underneath. And to do this you need a layer of crayon. And you need it kind of thick, so you're going to push rough. I know usually in my classes I tell everyone, you know, don't push so hard, it's going to break the crayon, it's going to make your arm hurt. But for this particular technique you would need to press pretty hard. I'm just doing some fun blending to get a base underneath. Yep. And then after you do that, you need to find a darker color. I am going to use black just because it's the easiest one to use for this technique. You do not have to. You could use whatever color you wanted to. And with the black crayon, you color right on top, or the darker color. It just has to be dark enough to cover up everything. And I'm making it nice and thick so the black covers up most of what I've done. And then you can take a stick or a pencil. I'm just going to use my fingernail because I have it here. And you scrape through the top layer of crayon to reveal what is underneath. Just like many other techniques, our crayon techniques have endless possibilities for their use. And your big ones are going to be your filling in and drawing shapes. You can't really make a drawing with crayons and color it in without filling in the shapes. Blending is also going to be a big one. Blending allows you to take crayons which are made out of wax and make the colors look more realistic. And it also gives you that opportunity of adding darks and lights without doing pressure. Again, pressure is another way that you can use darks and lights if you want it all to be the same color. And you could always mix the two as well, which is a lot of fun. Your repetitive mark making, that's going to be your texture go-to. You want to make a texture that's grass, repetitive mark making of grass. You want to make something that looks fluffy, you're going to make a repetitive mark for something that is fluffy. That's your texture go-to. Overdrawing, right? That's your way to add extra details. Controlled scribbling is either going to be a blending technique, or sometimes it can be a texture technique. Or if you're making an abstract piece of artwork, it's a great way to fill things in and make something that's just a little bit more fun. And of course, our last and more for fun things, we don't get to use that often. Crayon rubbing is a great way to add texture to a picture if you can find something that has a similar texture to the object you're trying to draw. Crayon resists, oftentimes we use that in projects just as a way of having a little bit more fun and to be more creative with the project. But I am sure that you could think of some ways, perhaps making your clouds and then painting your sky. Same thing with grass, other things that you want maybe the background to fade away more and your images to stand out. You would have your crayon with your images and then your background be your water-based thing. And then engraving, if you have something where you've made a very thick layer of crayon and you want to get back down underneath it to add a different detail, engraving is a good way to do that, because I can actually now take this and I could go back over top of it with another color if I really wanted to add something. I have also used this when I've made eyes to add back in the light spots in the eye. So just taking and adding back in your light. And that lets you sometimes go back in with your white crayon a little bit more and add a better light spot. So this can be used for many different things. This is just the most fun and vibrant and making your own scratch art kind of way.